Hi, welcome to Happy Let's Talk About It Tuesday. Wait, I totally messed that up.
It's all right. We'll roll with it. Keep it coming. Come on.
It's one of those days. I'm Georgette, I'm the mom.
And I'm TJ. I'm the daughter. Just kidding. The son.
And we're both study and work in the field of psychology, and we are passionate about sharing what we know with you so that you can live your best life. And today we're going to kind of bring a few things full circle. We've been talking about self-awareness, emotional regulation, and those are both components of emotional intelligence, which is the ability to manage your emotions, use your emotions to guide your thoughts and actions, recognize others' emotions, which we often, I think that's one of the bigger struggles we have, and then understanding emotional language. So that's just some of what we're going to talk about today. So starting off with self-awareness, we talked about this last week and really understanding who you are and what you know. This, when we talk about emotional intelligence, that really has to do with emotions, right? That makes sense. So being able to recognize your emotions and their effect, assessing your own strengths and limits, and having self-confidence, being sure about your self-worth and your capabilities. That's just one component of emotional intelligence.
And then it's a very important component because first thing is you just have to be aware of some of the disadvantages that you may have, that you kind of habitually created throughout the entirety of your life, right? Because those emotions are always hard to kind of dim down. But when we identify where we can go to, if it's depression first or sadness or anger, when you identify those, you can start to prepare with some of the things that you can tell yourself to calm down, some things that you can do to calm down. But first, you have to identify, where do I tend to go off the tracks?
Right. If you don't know yourself, you can't really be expected to know anybody else. And you and I were talking about this afterwards, that KCREP, which is the accrediting body for counseling, they list self-awareness as like a number one trait that they want in their counselors, and the number one trait they want developed in the counselor's clients. Super, super important. I mean, it's a starting place. It really is. Self-regulation. We've talked about emotional regulation in the past, but when we typically think about experiencing our emotion, it involves self-control, trustworthiness, conscientiousness, adaptability, and innovation. It could be anything from just managing how we respond to something, or letting ourselves respond to something, but then dialing it back when we need to.
And more often than not, we let the emotion just linger for too long, when in reality, we can release it very quickly after it's initially brought upon, but we tend to ruminate on it and make it bigger and bigger and bigger, right?
Right. Taking responsibility for our own personal performance, our own involvement and ownership in the communication process in general, being able to handle change is really, really strong. Because if we don't, what's the first thing we do when we can't handle change? We express it in so many different emotions, frustration, anger.
The more that change comes, the more that the unknown comes, and with more unknowns makes more of a subconscious reaction to more possible danger, because it's unknown. Right. And we love control. But the best way to do that is to identify those issues and then control with behaviors and with patterns what you can do to help rise above some of those emotional disadvantages that you may have.
Right. And then when we talk about innovation, it's really kind of about being about flexible, being open to new ideas and new information. So self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation is the third component. And motivation, one thing I read about motivation is people with high EQ, which is emotional or EI, emotional intelligence, typically are more intrinsically motivated, which kind of makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah.
When we talk about motivation and emotional intelligence, we really want to talk about striving to reframe those negative emotions so that we can move forward with our goals, helping to achieve things, striving to improve, aligning goals with the groups, acting on opportunities that come up, and being persistent in pursuing our goals are all components of motivation in terms of EI.
Yeah, and making goals and things based off motivations is very helpful, because in the time where you don't necessarily feel very motivated, you have to be self-disciplined. So identifying the things that kept you motivated, at least kept you in line with your goals, you can say to yourself, hey, I'm not feeling like doing it today, but I know that after it's done, it will most likely improve that emotional reaction, or most likely, if anything, improve your awareness as well.
Right. Empathy is another component of emotional intelligence. This, I think, is something that if you're going to work on any of those 5 components, this would be, I think, one of the strongest ones. It involves recognizing how people feel. Empathetic people typically are service oriented. They know how to develop others, because if you know how people are feeling, you know how to respond so that you can develop them appropriately. You know how to leverage diversity. You are politically aware. You're one of those people, if you're empathetic, you're not often going to upset people around you when you have a different viewpoint. You're going to know how to say it in a better way.
Yeah, but with empathy go back up a little bit, because with empathy comes a lot of issues, right? Because some people are too empathetic, and that's what we talked about earlier, is dwelling in those emotions, right? Service oriented, right? The more you focus on some of the things outside of your control, the less service you do to yourself, right? The more that you're empathetic and the more that you continue to hold on to, it may help develop others, but it could have an issue with how you're developing yourself and so on and so forth. So just making sure, once again, and understanding and intelligence of where that tends to be, is more so positive, negative. You can kind of go either way.
Alrighty, oops, wrong mouse. Okay. Social skills, that is the last component. And when you have strong social skills, you're usually able to influence other people. So you know how to persuade people in an appropriate manner. Communication, you are a good leader. You're able to inspire and guide people. You are a change catalyst. You can initiate and manage change, which that is like one of the number one keys in keeping organizations healthy and strong year after year, is the ability to change. And if you are strong at initiating and managing change, you can keep yourself viable in your job, but also your organization that you're working for. Conflict management, you're able to build relationships, collaborate with people, cooperate, and work as that team player. And I think when you think about those different social skills and you think about the workforce, I mean, those are important. Those are super important. And they're also important in relationships that you have with people. All right, so how do you improve emotional intelligence? First off, you observe how you react to others, making a concerted effort to put yourself in their place, being open and accepting of their perspectives and their needs.
Yeah, always trying to find an alternative thought pattern. There's always going to be an alternative thought pattern that might be better than the one that gets immediately drawn out, right? Because that's more so emotionally being driven. So thinking about, once again, their perspective, bird's eye view, right? If somebody else was coming to you with these issues, how would you give them advice, right? Just looking at it from an entirely different perspective, whereas emotionally, we're not instinctually wired to look at other people's perspective, right? We're instinctually wired to only look at our own, focus on our own, until we get that intelligence, breathe through it. We have some of these other kind of coping skills that we learn so that you can overpower that emotional pull, which is very strong.
Right. I think, and I do this, and I don't know if other people do it as well, but sometimes I get such what I think are good ideas that I'm still formulating my ideas while people are talking. I'm not listening. Listening, I think, is really important in emotional intelligence. Here's one that TJ always says. He has a quote. I'm going to let him share with you. Take a look at your work environment and your work behavior. If you're seeking attention for your accomplishments, try practicing humility.
When you are good at something, you will tell everybody. When you're great at something, they'll tell you. So if you're seeking for that recognition, just continue to perform as high as you possibly can. And if you look at it and say, I believe I'm performing to the highest of my abilities, I believe I'm performing pretty well, at the end of the day, who cares what others think of you, even if it is in your work environment, right? It only matters if you believe that you're doing the necessary things, right? Because if they think that you need to work on things, guess what? Then that can make you improve as a person. If they give you suggestions or bring things up and they're not necessarily true, then you don't have to pay it any worthy. But either way, you're unharmed, right? So people's words, although we like it, we want it, we don't need them. We only need our own,
right?
Which is what we forget.
That kind of speaks to that intrinsic motivation that we talked about earlier. Yeah. That's really important.
Doing it for you. It has to be done for you.
I think when it's done for you, it's also more authentic and more genuine. It feels right. Engage in self-evaluation and identify your weaknesses. We kind of talked about that a little earlier. That's the whole self-awareness key. Examine how you react to stressful situations and work on staying calm, collected, and under control.
Preparing for those situations, identifying what could go wrong, thinking about what I need to think of, what do I need to do that will help me stay in control during those moments.
Right. Like in a workplace, you can almost anticipate the other options that people might have. And in a relationship, it's the same thing.
Because you complain about them every day. Wink, wink, hint, hint.
Take responsibility for your actions. This includes facing your mistakes head on, apologizing, and trying to make things right.
Mm-hmm.
This may seem to some people like a step down, but it's okay to take that step down, because what happens when you do that is you earn the respect of other people, and they will actually help you to move back up off of that step you went down from. So yeah, it's hard to acknowledge that we're wrong sometimes, but I almost feel like it's empowering. I don't have a problem with this at all, for me personally. Examine how your actions will affect others before taking those actions. That kind of speaks to what you were saying, TJ. Getting fluent in the language of emotions. Learn how to identify and differentiate between and discuss different but related emotions. So going back to that autonomic system that we have, and how those emotions trigger bodily responses on us. Emotions can trigger very similar responses.
Yeah, you can trick your way, you can think your way, and emotion can lead you into fight, flight, or freeze, into thinking that you're in a lot more danger than you really are. And with those cognitive thoughts, with these preparations, with this emotional intelligence, you'll be able to always have a cognitive fighting chance to bring yourself back down. Because once again, these emotions may always be getting a pull out of you. If you're a little angry beaver, you're going to always kind of have, that might be your first instinctual reaction, but you can control how long it lasts. You can control and identify some of these things, right? What happens when you get angry, right? Because that's why you do it for yourself, but you do it for other people, right? If I get angry here and act out, how is that going to look on my mom? How is that going to look on my family? How is that going to look on my purpose and my job and all these other things, right? Because, a mistake made in anger, lasts an eternity. And no matter how much the anger dissipates, that mistake never will.
Naming your emotions can help you learn to do that. If you go to a pediatrician's office, or the office of somebody who works with young kids, you'll often see charts with just different facial expressions, with the name underneath it as to what the expression is. And it's there to help children identify and label their emotions, because that's sometimes very hard to do.
Keep on.
Using third person is a good way to distance ourselves from our emotions, but without denying them or pushing them away.
Yeah, easier to get through them, right? Once again, separate yourself, because instinctually it's like, I am rage, I am this, I am that, and you are not all of that. It just makes you feel like it's all consuming you, but it's not.
Right, and that kind of leads to the next thing. No emotions are bad. It's important to recognize and embrace all the emotions that we have. Feel your emotions in your physical body. We were talking about that earlier, whether it's sweaty palms, tense muscles, heart pounding. It's really important to feel your emotions in order to better understand and regulate them. So be cognizant of what's happening with your body before you speak. Practice that pause.
All right, because what I like to say is that your immediate emotional response, more often than not, it's going to be lying to you in a sense. There's going to be a lot of information not necessarily brought into the situation to dissect, because in that moment it's right here, right? Sympathetic response, I'm only seeing my perspective, I'm only seeing the little things. But with breathing and with identifying some of those coping skills, you can start to open it back up, because as soon as you open it back up, you realize that the instinctual emotional responses that you're getting are not even you, it's just lying to you. Think about it.
Yeah, notice the buildup of emotions before you're triggered. It speaks to a lot of what TJ was saying. Recognizing recurring patterns, because like you said, we can't anticipate these because we've seen them before. Wink, wink. He did that earlier.
Always the same pattern. It's always, especially because as soon as you get into that really emotional state, you're on autopilot. It's going so quickly. It's just, what do we know? What have we been here before? So those patterns, those emotional patterns are always going to be very, very similar. Be very hard for them to be different. More likely than not, going to be along the same lines. You just got to dig.
Right. Write down your feelings throughout the day. Keep a journal. And if I've seen some journals where they have the emoticons of the different facial expressions, circle one and just go to the next page. It's, every hour or so to keep your emotions in check.
One group that we have for this, I'll start the group by saying, write down everything that you've done so far today. It'll be like 11 or 2 or something like that. So they'll do it. And then, they'll write it all out, and I'll ask them. So what emotion, if you could pick an emotion, what would you love to feel in the morning? And the simple question is, look at what you've done. Have you put yourself in the position to do so? A lot of times, no. Then you ask yourself, same thing, if in the middle of the day, what would be a desired emotion for you, right? And think about some of the different levels. You have higher level positive, like excitement and joy. So thinking about thoughts or behaviors that are going to get you there, right? Or maybe mid-level, more so appreciation and love, which can kind of go up and down depending. But what are the things that are going to make me feel appreciative? What are going to be the thoughts and the things that I can do that are going to make me feel love, right? At night, or another thing, well, more so when you're at night, but more lower level, right? More contentment, more serenity, more peace, so you can kind of get your way into a sleep a little bit easier and have a more comfortable sleep. So once again, right now, do you know what emotion you want to be feeling right now? I bet you don't. So identify one, think about for the rest of the day, what are things and thoughts that you can do that are going to help you better facilitate it? Boom goes a dynamite.
I like that. I like that.
It's a very good group.
Yeah.
I make them look stupid every time because and then once you do it, it then becomes habitual. Like all those other anger patterns that we've been talking about, we're starting to build new ones.
You're pruning those neural pathways.
Pruning, yeah.
Yes.
Hurting cats at first.
Or kittens. So some of us struggle with emotional intelligence because we tend to be more process oriented. I kind of lean towards process oriented. I always have to remind myself to consider the people involved. If you tend to be process oriented, one strategy that might help you with emotional intelligence is think of emotions as data. It's information. Just like any other information you gather throughout the day, use it to help you make better decisions and to change your perspective.
And I like that. And when we feel them so strongly in that moment, that's the only emotion, that's the only information that we can see is the emotion. When you look back at some of the things that really kind of gotten you mad or like past stressors, thoughts won't come in first, emotions will come in first. And then I'll be like, what were the thoughts in the moment? What are the thoughts now? And that's where the fixing begins. That's where the opening up begins. That's where emotional intelligence begins, but nobody wants to do that. Right?
So I took last night an emotional intelligence test. Psychology Today has one. It's 45 minutes long. It is 146 questions. I'll be honest, I got kind of over it by question 111.
Your emotional resilience was dwindling.
It was late. I scored 80 out of 100. Which on the one hand disappointed me a little bit because I really expected it to be higher, but on the other hand, I'm happy for the opportunity to try to increase that. So I might practice some of what we've talked about today and take it again next week and see if my number improves.
Yeah.
And I'm going to attach that link to our description in YouTube so that you can take it as well. If you'd like to share with us your thoughts after you get your results, we'd love to hear from you.
And that's an interesting thing to bring up is you were slightly disappointed with an 80, which is a low B, right? And once again, it doesn't necessarily depend on what happens to you, how we think about it. For you, it's very easy to look at that and be like, damn, it's not an A. Damn, I'm this. Damn, I'm that. Instinctually a lot of things. But then you say to yourself that I can make this better. Right? I can't do that. I can't just, but you can improve that score. Right. You just talked about how you can do it. We're not that, easy to communicate with ourselves in a lot of those situations, right? So taking that and identifying it and bringing it to some of the other issues.
Right. I think one of the things, as we talk about this, one of the things I think that might help me in a strategy is just to kind of, because I'm one of those people who go to information first when I'm confronted with a conflict or a problem. I look for information. I'm going to look up all the different kinds of emotions you could possibly feel, because I bet most of us would label maybe 10 emotions in the course of a day we feel. But there are combinations of emotions like angst. What is angst?
Yeah.
That's a combination of other things.
Yeah.
There's secondary
hopelessness, depression, suppressed feeling. There's a lot of different words. And like you said, what are they actually making an impact in your life? Because oftentimes we just don't necessarily have them in the forefront of our awareness.
Right. All right. So take the quiz if you're interested. Share with us some of your thoughts and have a great week. We will see you next Tuesday for Let's Talk About It Tuesday. The awkward part where I forget how to turn this off
right here.
in a meeting.
No, you stop. Cancel. Go. Look where my finger is.
Oh, sorry.
Cancel it and stop right now.
This one.